The government claims to sell AIG stock for a profit. So are the Fed's good money managers after all? I'm Alan Barton. Stand by for Front Page. Joining me in studio, Doug Altner, writer and instructor at the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. Terry, so what are the details of this stock sale by the government? What's behind it?
Well, the Treasury wants to unwind some of its stock it holds in AIG, so it's going to sell a big chunk of it and lower its position in AIG, I think to 20% or something like that. But, you know, it claims it's making money on this big deal, but in fact, it's actually not making money.
And how is it that what's the discrepancy there? Is this just political posturing to say they're making money? Or,
yeah,
or is it an accounting trick?
It's an accounting trick. I mean, Neil Barofsky, whom the newspapers keep identifying as a critic of the TARP program, no, he's not a critic. He actually was the Inspector General of the TARP program, understands it very well, says these numbers are funny, that, you know, the Treasury will be selling the shares at $28 a share and claiming they're making money. In fact, he says they won't make money unless the shares rose to $43 a share. So there's quite a discrepancy there in terms of whether they're making money or not. In fact, they're losing money, hand over fist on this.
Doug, what do you make of this? I mean, these numbers are huge, even though it's only billions. I mean, we've gotten, since 2008, we've gotten into talking about trillions like it's like this, so billions. But still, that's a large amount of money. How do you tell whether it's, you know, as Terry alludes to, is it funny money, is it not funny money, is it accounting tricks, stock options, this, that, the other thing? How do you make sense of it?
I'd prefer to step back, and I'd say it doesn't really matter if the government made money in this sale, because really this whole issue is a question of does the end justify the means? Suppose the government made money by selling AIG stock. Does that mean they should continue to bail out corporations in the future? I would say absolutely not. The government should not be in the business of forcing us to bail out failing corporations. Really, I think we need to think about this issue of, do we want to have a system where businesses are free to go and flourish, or do we want to have a system where they're forced to have to bail out the failing businesses, where the successful ones are forced to have to bail out the failing businesses, and we're way better off with the first system than we are.
Well, what about Terry? I mean, I think they're saying overall with TARP, there's a potential that the taxpayers will come out ahead, you know, by some number of billions of dollars, 10 billion, 15 billion, whatever. I mean, it's all guesswork to a certain degree, but, you know, to counter Doug, does it justify the means? I mean, you've saved a bunch of jobs that would have been lost. AIG was a huge company with tentacles all over the world. Is there an advantage to occasionally stepping in and trying to solve the problem this way?
No, there really isn't. And in fact, that's the hidden cost in all of this, because that will not come out at the end when they do the reckoning and they say, well, we spent $411 billion and we came out with $420 billion or whatever, so we did pretty well. Well, what they won't be saying is that major corporations in America will now say to themselves, aha, if I get into big trouble, I'm too big to fail. So, you know, we're sowing the seeds for
prompt
future.
Probably reckless behavior to expand beyond their means, because the bigger they get, the quicker they get, the more trouble it is when they fall, and the more they can rely on the government.
Future bad risks will be taken as a result of these actions. And
I would
hazard,
I think.
Moral hazard is the word. And I would add one other thing, and that is when you reckon the total cost of all the interventions here, we're talking a massive amount of money. There was a $1 trillion stimulus, a $700 billion TARP fund, 400 or so billion of which was spent. The Fed now is embarked on a quantitative easing part 3, which is going to take their amount of stimulus over $3 trillion. So we're talking about $5 trillion in stimulus. I haven't seen anywhere near that amount of added GDP. So even if you were just doing a strict...
It would have been much worse, Terry.
Yes, it could have been.
It would have been so much worse if the government hadn't taken these steps. You see, you're not looking at a sufficiently negative alternative. See, that's how it's always justified.
That's it.
On the issue of bailouts, of course, the government's still holding a significant stake in Government Motors. General Motors, I'm sorry. Keep on getting confused. Government Motors seems to be floundering. It came out this week, they're losing about 50 Gs with every Volt they sell. That's the level of subsidizing of this thing. And they've sold, I think, 7 Volts. There are 7 of them on the roads in America. That's the great demand for the Volt. Doug, what do you think of this in terms of the efficacy of government intervention here? I mean, because they're selling this as, you know, one of their big slogans, Biden's big slogan. Osama is dead and GM is alive. It seems like GM is on life support.
Well, yes, that's definitely the right way of thinking about it. And I think people need to realize that General Motors had a lot of systematic problems that were created by government. I think a major one is the unions really had an unearned power given to them by government that no company would have if they had to negotiate with the company on a market setting. And because the government bailed them out, these fundamental problems were not addressed. So just think of some of the issues that happened with the UAW. You had about 10 people receiving a pension for every one person working. That's unsustainable for any business. You had an entire factory at one point in Oklahoma City of 2,000 people getting paid to do nothing but to play cards and play darts because the company, it cost them more to challenge the union to lay off these people than to just pay them for doing nothing. You had lose-lose transactions between the company and domestic auto parts supplier because they didn't want to rock the boat with the union by challenging them. And so they were overpaying for auto parts that they could have gotten for cheaper from elsewhere. And then you had the auto parts supplier, which was also unionized, was selling the parts to General Motors at a price that was lower than their cost because they didn't want to rock the boat with the union either. It's ridiculous. No wonder this company got into trouble. And I think these problems have not been addressed as seriously as they would be had this actually been a bailout motivated by economic reasons and not political posturing.
How would you distinguish between this bailout and what they did with Chrysler in the 80s, for instance, which is perceived to have been a successful government intervention? Chrysler's still around. Yeah, they needed another bailout here in 2008, but people seem to think as long as the brand is there and it exists, that this is a good thing. The administration sells having saved 1 million auto jobs. It's a little deceitful because 1 million is, I think, the total number of people who work in the industry.
Yeah, the level of involvement in this bailout was far greater than the one in the early 80s Chrysler one was basically a $1 billion loan guarantee. That was it. It was we guaranteed this loan for them. We're going to back it up. But in this case, they basically had an equity stake of 60% of the company. They transferred a large chunk of the stock to the unions, took away bondholders' rights, and basically destroyed a lot of value there. Granted pension benefits to unionized workers and took them away from non-unionized.
Too. Didn't they get away with not having to pay
tax benefits?
No income tax benefits.
And took them away from non-union workers, by the way. Non-union workers at Delphi, for instance, lost their pension rights. So, this was just a massive giveaway to the unions. And to this day, GM's board is more or less controlled by the government. So to say that this has been a success on any level is utterly false.
All right, guys, good conversation. For Terry and Doug, I'm Alan Barton. You've been watching Front Page.